Lethe Episode 1 is a first-person horror exploration game that follows Robert Dawn, who travels to a mysterious colony when his boat crashes in a storm. Atmosphere. There's a deep isolation to the game and it follows you through to the end. There's no sign of anybody from the moment you arrive on the colony. Houses are left abandoned and fresh bread on the tables, lights are left on and the notes are scattered about for other members of the colony, but there's just no sign of life at all. As you enter the mines, the game seems to stretch on forever as they continue to go on and on. There's an air of hopelessness that you'll never see another living being as you delve deeper into the ever-expanding structures. Giant shafts and industrial machinery are separated by physics puzzles and the occasional hint that you aren't alone, but the game's main theme is isolation first and foremost, and there wasn't much room for anything else. There are a few moments of dread and apprehension when I started to encounter the enemies, but the excursions are but small parts and the majority of the gameplay is just spooky exploration in these mysterious abandoned mines. Lethe is spooky, its environments can be foreboding, and it is incredibly lonely, and whilst its atmosphere isn't the strongest, it still seems fitting for the game. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. There's a very select few scripted events, like people walking past doorways and things making noises from other rooms. They're not always very impactful, but it is sometimes just strange to see anything alive in such a dead and empty game. There's a lot of creepy and foreboding things behind locked and barred doors that I find frustrating but ultimately enjoy. Bodies hanging in the distance and the implication that something sinister lurks further ahead in a direction you can't go. The chase sequences aren't very well designed, with enemy animations being a bit overly dramatic and robotic, plus their design I find bizarre but also a bit too plain. The enemy AI seems to lose you very easily once you hide, but seems to know where you are at all times otherwise. It's very inconsistent, but the worst thing of all is that the chase sequences seem to go on until you leave the area, and some of the areas require you to solve puzzles to leave, meaning that you could be stuck in a chase section for an extended length of time, which ends up wearing thin. The game uses a fixed amount of health and healing items, and getting in a chase for too long can cause you to waste all of your healing items before you leave, depending on how long you're stuck for. There aren't really any death animations either, the screen just blurs, which is extremely anticlimactic. Sadly, this is all the game really offers in terms of scares, and it almost seems like the enemies were shoehorned in as a last-minute addition. That's still one Harry Mason. Sound design. There's some mysterious gentle ambient tones that almost blend in together with the wind that seem to dynamically get more intense as things happen around the player, but the game layers a lot of things over them, like a deeply reverberated metal grinding and shrill strings. The chase music is decent, but the chases themselves kind of spoil it. There's a lot of great sound effects, mostly used for machinery and ambiance, that really bring many of the environments to life, like water dripping and the sound of fire burning, pipes emitting steam and the occasional rumble. The sound effects for the telekinetic powers you receive are really cool, but on the other hand, the sound effects for the enemies, especially the female butchers, sound almost silly with high-pitched screaming and vomiting noises, which makes the enemies even less frightening in design. The directional audio is satisfactory and helps pinpoint enemies, but it's not used for much else. Whilst the enemy noises are a bit jarring, the rest of the game is excellently immersive with some great audio pieces and sound effects. That's 2 Harry Masons. Gore. For a game that has so little life in it, it has an overwhelming amount of death, with bodies stacked up in corridors to bones and viscera layering the floor like a thick carpet of death in the later areas of the game. It comes off as a bit unrealistic, and considering how few people seem to live on the colony and how there has to be thousands of pieces of human remains scattered about the environment, a few bodies here and there would make sense, but what's presented just seems over the top. That's still 2 Harry Masons. Story. You play as Robert Dawn, who finds a strange letter in his deceased father's belongings, which makes him reconsider what he knew of his past and points him towards a strange island. Upon arriving, he finds it abandoned and derelict, but seems to have some strange kind of technology that doesn't fit in with anything else. The story is a bit difficult to follow, mostly being told through notes and diary entries, but seems to describe an underground colony who all became infected with some unknown disease, and the struggles the lead doctor faced trying to cure them through experimenting with a locally found mushroom that produced a black liquid. The story mostly focuses on the ultimate betrayal of their people in his unethical experiments. Most of the notes are scientific findings of the Doctor, and the story of Robert Dawn is mostly just his past and then the few brief insights you get into his thoughts on loading screens. I found that a lot of my questions weren't answered and too much was implied but never stated or left to the player to figure out, and the disappointing thing about the game is they may never make a follow-up to Episode 1, with the story ending on a cliffhanger, making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. Lethe's atmosphere is really spooky and moody with some really great lighting, some fun puzzles and creepy moments, but its attempts to escalate it beyond that seem to have dragged down the rest of the experience. There's an unreasonable amount of dead bodies and bones, and the enemy interactions are confounding. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I got tired of being chased, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.